Hmm. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining me today for my next summary of the book study that I'm offering here. The book is entitled On Tyranny. The author is the wonderful and brilliant Mr. Timothy Snyder. If you're not familiar with Timothy Snyder's work, he's written several books around the Holocaust and Russia and the rise of fascism in Russia, authoritarianism in Russia, and now in America as well. And Timothy Snyder lived in Ukraine, I think, for about 10 years, maybe more or less. And of course, he speaks Ukrainian, he speaks Russian, and he was in that era part of the world when the Soviet Union, or rather when Russia has invaded Ukraine back in 2014 and so forth. And he really has studied this history, is evident in both the book and the videos that we've been watching in the book study. So please check him out on YouTube. He's got hundreds and hundreds of videos there, and they're all worth watching. Even, if you just like to watch brilliant people talk, it's such a pleasure. I get a lot of joy in watching really smart people articulate ideas and concepts, and he's really good at that. So strongly recommend him. Okay, so we are on chapter 4, which is take responsibility for the face of the world. And it's interesting in this chapter, it's quite different. The video is quite different than the book. So on this video, I might read a little bit from the book as well. But let's go ahead and start with the video, and then I will talk a little bit about some of the ground that we covered in the session, and then I'll read a little bit from the book probably as well. So here goes chapter 4.
Of beautiful illustrations by Nora Krug. So the book on tyranny is appearing in a graphic edition in October of 2021. And between now and then, I'm going to release these 20 short videos about each of the lessons. I'm going to read a lesson and then make a few remarks about what we have gone through in the last few years and what we might expect in the years to come. So we're now on lesson number 4. Lesson number 4 is take responsibility for the face of the world. The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow. Notice the swastikas and the other signs of hate. Do not look away and do not get used to them. Remove them yourself and set an example for others to do so. So this idea of reaching out with responsibility is central to the way that I think about freedom. If we think about freedom just in terms of what's easiest for us to do, what we find most convenient in a given moment, of course we're never going to rub away a swastika. At best, we'll look at it with irritation and think maybe I'll do something about that later. But what if freedom is actually a collective project? What if, in order for each of us to be free, all of us have to do something, if only a little something? And what if the signs that we see, the symbols that we see, little visual aspects of our reality, what if they are moments of choice for each of us and for all of us? This is, by the way, a very important insight by someone who I knew very slightly and admired greatly, Václav Havel. Václav Havel's most important essay, The Power of the Powerless, was written in communist Czechoslovakia, but its insights, I think, are universal. It was his point, and it was the point of many other dissidents, that one has to exercise a bit more responsibility than seems comfortable. And the way to realize that a moment for exercising responsibility has come is these little irritants, right? These things which are slightly wrong about the outside world. So, for example, a swastika. We take part in its existence by seeing it. sure, you're not the one who painted the swastika, but in some sense, you are partaking in its presence by walking by and doing nothing. This was Havel's point. Havel talked about the general panorama of everyday life and how, in some sense, we all co-produce it. And although each of us as individuals can only do a little to shape it, we're nevertheless making an important decision when we do decide to shape it. It was very cheering to me, very encouraging that, in fact, people did come out to whitewash swastikas. There were an awful lot more swastikas painted in public spaces in the United States of America in late 2016 and thereafter. And there were also groups who quietly, cooperatively, made sure that a lot of those swastikas were covered over immediately. It wasn't surprising to me that more swastikas came up at that particular time. I was glad to see that other people had thought about this lesson, which I'm sure they thought about in their own way, of taking responsibility for the face of the world. I want to make a couple more remarks about symbols, because of course we're at a time where the symbols of the United States, or the symbols of what the United States should be, are hotly contested, which is completely normal, by the way. Monuments go up and monuments go down. There is nothing more predictable, nothing truer about the history of public spaces than that. Monuments go up at a certain time, let's call it point A, in order to project into the future, all the moments after point A, a certain vision of the way the future should be. We think monuments are about the past. They're not about the past. Monuments arise in a moment of the past in order to influence the future from the point of view of point A, from the point of view of that past. And so when we think about monuments, we're not really talking about whether we're respecting history or not. History will be just fine with or without monuments. What we're thinking about is, what version do we want to communicate into the future? And this is where I want to speak about something that I didn't speak about when On Tyranny was published, which is our own symbols. There were plenty of swastikas. There still are plenty of swastikas, but there are also American symbols that we have to consider, or in some cases reconsider, like, for example, the Confederate flag. My sense would be that any symbol of the United States which cannot be accepted by the broad population of the United States, and to put it very mildly, the Confederate flag does not meet that test, shouldn't be thought of as a national symbol. But to be a little bit more fundamental about this, symbols which represent a true part of our history, the history of bondage, of chattel slavery, symbols that represent a true part of our history can be understood as that. They are part of our history. The question is whether chattel slavery, bondage, racial inequality, whether those are the values we wish to project into the future. Displaying or drawing or carrying a Confederate flag means that. And it doesn't just mean that to Black people. It means it in an objective sense, because that's what the symbol meant at the time. So the Confederate flag isn't just one of a set of neutral symbols that can be assembled or brought together in a random pattern. It has a specific meaning. If the wish is to project racial inequality and slavery as desirable values and practices, then that is what you communicate with that particular American symbol. And I focus on this because, of course, that symbol is very present in American political life. As I'm sure all of you will know, the Confederate flag was paraded through the United States Capitol on the 6th of January, 2021, something which, to my knowledge, I mean, historians are taught never to say never because there's always an exception, but to my knowledge, that had never happened before in the prior existence of the United States. And so we have to ask ourselves, how could we be a country where that particular symbol could reach that particular place at that particular time? I don't think we have to ask ourselves whether that's a symbol we want to project into the future. I think the answer is clearly no. But on the other side, there's one more set of symbols that I want to talk about. As we've seen monuments come down, as we've seen graffiti sprayed on walls to represent various kinds of American values, one symbol which I see and which makes me deeply uncomfortable, is the hammer and sickle. So for a number of young Americans, the hammer and sickle just means I understand. I've heard it 100 times or 1,000. It just means rejection of the status quo, something new. That may be what it means to you, but the hammer and sickle is the central symbol of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the most repressive major regime in the world right now. It's also the historical symbol of a number of communist parties which perpetrated policies of famine and terror. That might not mean anything to you, but it means a lot to an awful lot of people. And it also has a certain kind of objective meaning. It has a meaning in history, whether or not you're aware of it or not. Even if people weren't still alive who had suffered as a result of regimes that put forward that symbol, there would still be a meaning that you would be projecting into the future. So even as I don't have any problem with bringing down monuments, even as I don't have any problem with coming up with new symbols, I think we also have to make sure, friends on the left, that we're aware of what symbols stand for before we propose them as substitutes. As for me, I want to say something new now about taking responsibility for the face of the world. Taking responsibility for the face of the world is not just about avoiding the bad things. It's also about creating the new things. The painting that we do shouldn't just be painting over. The painting that we do also has to be work of creation. One of the big problems that we have, a fundamental problem in the United States, is that we don't have a very good sense of the future. And bringing down monuments, important though that might be, is not the same thing as filling up that space with a symbol for what we think the future should be, which of course is what monuments are all about and what art in some sense is about. And that's just the note that I wanted to close on. Taking responsibility for the face of the world is not just about cleaning up. Taking responsibility for the face of the world also involves thinking about what the face of the world should be. And this means confronting this problem that we have a very hard time thinking of the future. We have a very hard time thinking of the future. And without the future, democracy is very hard to maintain. And since we have this problem, we should recognize the people who can help. And the people who can help are the artists. The people who can help are the writers. The people who can help are the poets. All the people who are shoved to one side by a society which is pragmatic or instrumental, which confuses efficiency with values or productivity with aesthetics. These are the people who are actually capable of helping us to think about what kind of face we would like the future to have, or what kind of face we would like to be able to turn towards the future. So I wanted to close on that new note. Part of taking responsibility for the face of the world is thinking about what the future should look like and taking seriously the people who labor in the direction of generating possibilities, aesthetic possibilities and moral possibilities. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for that. And yeah, this chapter seemed particularly rich, not only to myself, but to those who attended the book study. So there was a lot of ground covered. I'll do my best to sort of summarize, but I did want to touch on a couple of the things that came up there in the video and the book study as well. And I'll just start with that one comment that Timothy just kind of dropped in there that seemed a bit off the cuff that maybe could use a bit of fleshing out. And that is that without a concept of the future, that democracy is challenging to maintain. And why is that? Well, when the future looks very bleak or impossible to see a positive in the future, the nervous system, the human nervous system, then tends to look to the past. And this is very typical fascist playbook. This is why they create a mythic past and then try to create a future that is not, we don't see any positivity. That's why Trump is crashing the economy. That's why he's, taking away human rights, right? So that our future becomes very challenging, taking away women's rights, taking away Black rights, taking away trans rights and gay rights. the future for those populations starts to look very bleak, and understandably so. If you're a member of a community that's actively being kidnapped and sent to torture prisons, your future probably looks pretty bleak. So then our nervous system looks to the past to find hope. And if that fascist movement has created something like MAGA, which make America great again, look to the past for some semblance of greatness, then those people start to buy into that because that's some hope, right? So we need to be on guard around that and to really start to come together as a community, as a people, to create some images of optimism, right? And that's tying into taking responsibility for the face of the world, as Timothy was saying there, artists and so forth. We need to really come together to create works of art, visually, musically, otherwise, that do inspire, that do create what we want to project out into the future. A couple of things that we see happening now in the news around this is wonderful. The rainbow chalk crosswalks in Florida and Alabama and elsewhere, that the government keeps trying to cover up, and then people come out there the next day or overnight and redo them. That's very important because we want to project gay rights into the future, right? We want to project trans rights into the future. So this is very important, right? This is why fascist regimes, what we see right now in the Trump administration in particular, attacking the Smithsonian museums, right? Whitewashing the Smithsonian, taking away any teachings around slavery. And the little bit that they're leaving in around slavery, they're saying that slavery was actually good for Black people, which is just horrific. But that's what they're trying to project into the future. So we need to really be aware that this is what's happening there. So a couple of other things, I've made some notes here. One of the things that Timothy brings up in the book, and I'll just read it quickly here from the book, um, around what was happening in Europe in 1930 the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, under the rule of Joseph Stalin, prosperous farmers were portrayed on propaganda posters as pigs, a dehumanization that in a rural setting clearly suggests slaughter. This was in the early 1930s as the Soviet state tried to master the countryside and extract capital for crash industrialization. The peasants, who had more land or livestock than others, were the first to lose what they had. A neighbor portrayed as a pig is someone whose land you can steal or take. But those who followed the symbolic logic became victims in their own turn. Having turned the poorer peasants against the richer, Soviet power then seized everyone's land for the new collective farms. Collectivization, when completed, brought starvation to much of the Soviet peasantry. Millions of people in the Soviet Union, Soviet Kazakhstan, and Soviet Russia died horrible and humiliating deaths between 1930 and 1933. Before it was over, Soviet citizens were butchering corpses for human meat. So, not to engage in fear mongering, but just to know that this is what's possible. I don't think that Trump or Kristi Noem or Stephen Miller have any more moral scaffolding than Stalin. Farmers are losing their crops because of the soybean tariffs. So we need to really be on alert around this. If you think it can't happen in America, you are sorely mistaken. So, yeah. Then he goes on to discuss in Germany, same era, 1930, 1933. This was when Nazi Party was coming to power in Germany. And they, created symbols to paint on uh, Jewish delicatessens and bakeries and storefronts, marked for to be at that time to be put out of business, really. So people wouldn't shop there anymore. Eventually, those became markings that the Secret Service used to disappear Jewish people. Now, as these symbols started to appear, the regular German population would ignore them mostly, right? Afraid to speak out, afraid to be seen, afraid to cause any sort of tension in the culture that they lived in. So those symbols became normalized. And unwillingly, the people who ignored those symbols or didn't take them, paint over them, and things like that became participants in the disappearing of Jewish people. This is the real issue with normalization, right? As we turn and accept the new uh, ugliness, because that's what our nervous system has to do, right? We have to sort of accept, okay, this is what's happening. But in that acceptance, we don't want to move into apathy or numb out, right? We want to accept it. This is what's happening. And then in that acceptance, we're empowered to change it. That's the important difference, right? So numbing out apathy feels good. Hide my head in the next Netflix series or whatever, not paying attention to what's happening. And sometimes that's what we need to do for a certain amount of time. But ideally, acceptance leads us to action. Otherwise, you know, well, we can just read are we going to end up butchering each other for human meat? And again, I'm sorry if that sounds like fear mongering, but just look at what's happening in America right now. So on the bright side, if there is a bright side, I'm a musician. I'm creating protest songs. Some of you may have heard some of those. South Park is doing wonderful work around protesting with their platform and things like that. Stephen Colbert, of course. Some brave news broadcasters, Rachel Maddow, are doing their part as well. We need to be mindful of what we create now and how that is going to create the future that we want, or if we become apathetic and end up in a future that we had no voice in creating and a future that we regret. So let's do a little bit of nervous system settling because that was pretty heavy. So, and this is a practice called VU breathing. I don't think I've introduced VU breathing here before. It comes from Dr. Peter Levine. The intention is to sort of create an internal massage with the vibration of the syllable VU. And so I'll just let's do a round of 5 here. And I'll do some havening with it as well. And I did do havening on a last video or some other videos. So havening is just the practice of sort of grabbing the arms right where the arms and the shoulders meet and giving a gentle squeeze down from shoulder to elbow. Hmm. I can already feel my nervous system start to soften a bit there. And then if you like, you can go from the squeeze to just a gentle stroke. And I might do 5 or 6 of those, and I go back to the squeeze. And then VU is here. We do the VU like this. I'm breathing in, and then VU. So just a little bit of background on myself and why I'm doing these sessions before I close here. So I'm a certified clinical trauma professional and a longtime mindfulness and meditation practitioner. I've been practicing 40 years now and really made it my life's work. And I work primarily in with wounded warriors and in addiction recovery. And my hope is that I can offer a little bit of healing of the trauma that America is in collectively right now, and really in the world, as white uh, white supremacy or right wing extremism spreads across the globe. This is quite traumatic for most people, whether we know it or not. Now, how I'm defining trauma here is simply some event that lands, impacts us in a stressful way in the absence of an empathic other, right? So if we keep that stress, that trauma trapped in our nervous system without any way of processing that, that leaves an indelible mark and becomes a part of our personality. So we become angry people or sad people or fearful people or confused people, right? And how that manifests in society is a very clear example of the Homeland Security Department. So after September 11th, Rumsfeld, good God, glad that guy's gone. He developed, him and his cronies developed Cheney, right? And those people developed the Homeland Security. So asking us, the population, to give up our freedoms for the sake of safety and security. Anytime a government asks you to give up your freedom in spirit of safety, they're lying to you. We're much more safe when we have more freedom. We're much more safe when we have more freedom. So keep that in mind going forward. So I digress there a bit. Recognizing, yes, that Homeland Security was developed in that with that lie attached to it, that we need to be able to tap your phones at will. We need to be able to stop and search people to keep people safe, right? And all kinds of things that were happening under the banner of Homeland Security. And now we see that department completely corrupted by the current administration and used to kidnap yellow, black, and brown people off the streets of America and send them to torture prison camps. So this is what happens when a whole culture is traumatized and acts from that trauma rather than acting from present moment awareness. So because we will defeat the fascist regime in America. Trump will die probably very soon, hopefully. And did I say that out loud? I guess I did. And I don't think MAGA will survive that. Eventually, and if it doesn't happen, then eventually fascism does come to an end. But there will be a reconstruction. And my hope is that reconstruction is done through present moment awareness and kindness rather than from fear, so that we don't keep repeating the cycle. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hope to see you please do come to the live book study. They're very helpful and very therapeutic. And so if you can make it, if you do want to come, we meet on Sunday evenings at 8:30 p.m. East Coast time for roughly an hour, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes. And if you'd like to join, please message me through Facebook or Instagram or find my email on my website, suchsweetthunder.org. There'll be a short interview process so that I make sure you're not with Homeland Security or with ICE. And then I will send you a link to the session. Thank you very much again, and stay safe and stay informed. Thank you.